FutureDad 16. Why does the right hate libertarianism? Quote, what will happen to the poor in an objectivist society? The interviewer. Quote, if you want to help them, you will not be stopped. Barbara Brandon. Like many men, I became even more red-pilled when I went through a divorce. It wasn't a particularly traumatic divorce, landing somewhere in the middle of what, after all, 50% of married men experience. Then post-divorce, as required by law, I indulged in several years of mostly casual dating, fueled by newly adopted PUA skills. Whilst the PUA mindset helped me better understand and prevail with women, beyond that it was a philosophical dead end. The better I got, the more hollow it felt. So I continued my search for meaning and purpose and eventually found the MGTOW philosophy. See FutureDad 15, Superpowers Part 3, MGTOW. Where there were gaps in MGTOW, I filled them with principles of other philosophies, particularly minimalism and stoicism. This combination provided a reinforced framework to comprehend and defend against the hostile, gynocentric nature of modern society. In one sense, after spending my 20s as a purple-pilled science nerd, I had begun to apprehend the actual levers of society. So when I began to notice the decay of Britain from about 2011 onwards, it came as no surprise. The country's calamitous direction of travel was heartbreakingly predictable. Were I blue-pilled, it would have appeared out of nowhere as a series of random, unconnected news events. But it was obvious. Uncontrolled mass immigration was erasing Britain's identity and was being imposed without a mandate, whilst both cheeks of the political elite feigned concern. Brexit in 2016 was a response to this. Native Brits were finally waking up to their political homelessness and demographic replacement. Holding these views made me, by fiat rather than by consent, part of the dissident right. But a genuine political counterpart to my red pill philosophy was missing. I was not far right or any of the other lazy communist slurs. I identified the same societal problems and general principles as the right, but not yet their collectivist solutions. If anything, it was polite, cosmopolitan society which had lurched to the left and left me, an ex-classical liberal, stranded. That again is of no surprise. Cthulhu always swims left. If a convenient label was needed, I came to realize a more accurate one would be libertarian objectivist. See FutureDad 60, Libertarianism versus Objectivism. Ludwig van Mises, Ayn Rand, and Milton Friedman made far more sense and more resonated with my values than anything that alt, trad, or dissident right could offer thus far. By then my ethos had become clear to me. A mosaic philosophy rather than a pre-existing one. The overlapping setup of objectivism, libertarianism, minimalism, stoicism, and MGTOW made everything in life explicable that was hitherto a complete puzzle. I grew to live and breathe these ideas, even in some cases to proselytize them. The latter didn't go very well. I learned that people can't and won't accept uncomfortable truths. You can't tell a happy wife, happy life sap to tread carefully. You can't tell a collectivist, right or left, that welfare destroys all races, even their favourite one. The human mind hates being misguided about something so much that it does almost anything to avoid confirming that fact. The soothing lie is the comfort blanket. Blue pill normies lash out in fear when you try to take that blanket away. I go deeper into this in FutureDad 2, Lies, Life's Deep Waters. So it's easy to understand why my curiosity was piqued when I noticed more and more right-wingers, a defunct term by now, as I will explain shortly, from around 2019 or so declare an intense ire for libertarianism. It ranged from the dismissive, libertarians think it's a bad thing to protect people from themselves, to outright hostility. This is why I hate libertarians. They look at the squalor and open drug taking and think it's absolutely fine. These aren't paraphrases. These are two quotes from the comments section of a blog I read earlier today. It pains me to say it, but my conclusion is that there's something malignant buried deep in the psyche of traditional right. It overlaps more with the political left in one particular area than most people realise. I identify 1,000 times out of 1,000 on current issues on the news on the right than the left. So this is a painful realisation. It's time to roll back both sleeves, grab a scalpel and start the incision to find the tumour. The root cause of this tradcon hate for libertarianism is best understood by looking at the way politics is viewed by the traditional left and traditional right. It started with the French Revolution. Those who agreed with the king sat to the right, the rebels who disagreed, the left. Thus you have the left-right political spectrum. It was a blogger TFM, an early advocate of MGTOW, who opened my eyes to the far superior political trichotomy. It is a values-based difference that divides the political factions into three parts, not two. This explained why political ethos can't be neatly mapped onto a single straight line with any accuracy or predictive power. The most foundational value of the traditional right is stability, tradition. With the left, it is equality. There is one remaining point on the triangle, the one core value that both the conventional right and left wing claim, but neither side truly believes in: freedom. Furthermore, these three values go much deeper than a person's political persuasion. If you took an 18th century French anti-loyalist rebel on the left and asked if he believes in freedom, he'd say yes, freedom is sacred, but the aristocratic scum is not deserving of it. This is because the traditional left will claim with a dying breath that everyone is born equal, the blank slate theory, and any subsequent inequality is the fault of social injustice of some kind and should be corrected until we are all equal. Communism and all its variants is the endpoint of this. Well, technically a mountain of skulls is the endpoint, but I digress. If you ask the same of the aristocrat on the right, he would say freedom is paramount, but the left should go to prison for their rebelliousness. The traditional right would say, with tears in their eyes, that upholding tradition and stability is of gravest concern, and those on the left should be forced to comply for the sake of society and nationhood. The satanic panic and movie and book banning of the 1980s and 1990s is the endpoint of this, or, in more backwards parts of the world, Islam. It is quite plain to see that neither side values unshaven freedom. It always has to be tidied up and interfered with to make it presentable. Neither side actually believes in it, especially when the other side transgresses their values. That claim of a freedom in belief dissolves in contact with their revealed preference to sequester freedom from their political enemy. So when a libertarian says that freedom is the highest quality of a man, a community, a country, then it bothers the traditional right. A libertarian believes that freedom is an entitlement of both the left and the right. When I see a leftist jacking up in an alleyway, I think that's his choice. I know for sure it's not good for society, suspending my disbelief that such a thing exists. More importantly, I know that it's not good for an individual, especially an innocent child who has to cross his path and sees him. But there are far greater consequences for everyone by not cultivating the freedom that allows losers of all stripes to throw their life away. It would be terrific if they didn't, but it ends up worse for all free thinkers if we impede them. I will not sign society's death warrant by moving mountains in an effort to stop the worst in society from harming themselves. Similarly, the traditional and dissident right knows that ultimately they have to crush some freedoms to get their way. Strict morality codes, stiff penalties for drug use and the like. It's a mirror image of the left, who crush freedoms to enforce the strict language codes, wealth redistribution, and racial hiring practices. The right believes power lies with physicality, so they want to restrict it. The left believes power lies with psychology, so they want to restrict that. Society has oscillated between these two power schemes for decades. In the 80s to the mid-90s, the right were in the cultural ascendancy. From the late 90s to the 2020s, the leftist crazy train took over. It careered down the tracks with no signs of breaking until the mid-2020s, when the vengeful realpolitik of Trump, Putin and Xi stepped in. An antidote to all of this is liberty. The left pays lip service to it, but doesn't really understand it. They're always telling themselves by their utopianist goals. I'm a liberal, they will say, failing to see the bitter irony of, I want you to publicly agree that trans rights are human rights or I will get you fired. They will tolerate paedophilia and violence, but the only thing they won't tolerate is your intolerance of it. Conversely, the right usually does know liberty is the answer, but cannot bring themselves to admit it or fully support it. They see the social malaise and trace it back to excess freedoms in previous decades, as if it were that linear. The only way that is actually true was the advent of universal suffrage and feminism, two catastrophic ideas which they ironically have a massive blind spot about. See FutureDad 26, the dissident right's obsession with your date of birth. Hard right-wingers talk about the JQ, but defiantly ignore the WQ. There is no greater simp than a right-wing simp because he utterly believes in it. His left-wing simp counterpart is at least only pretending he believes in it to get laid. So, some of the right end up more twisted and bitter about libertarianism than any of the swivel-eyed left. The most bitter are the rightists who misdirect about open borders being a central tenet of libertarianism. It is not. The libertarian and objectivist goal is, first and foremost, the purging of the welfare state. Doing so neutralises the threat of mass migration because most undesirables will not want to come in the first place. Of course, foreign freeloader prevention isn't the only variable in the strong border formula. It's obvious that Japan would no longer be Japan if 20 million rich, successful Africans moved there. Libertarians who want complete open borders with humans as interchangeable economic units are fantasists at the extreme of the distribution. It is like defining the right by the Taliban and Lindsey Graham, religious and neocon variants of the most extreme right, or the left by Hitler and George Soros, national and international variants of the most extreme left. In essence, the traditional and often dissident right acts out in a massive display of projection by castigating libertarians. They express disdain for them because their existence reminds the right of its one fatal flaw. It needs force to sustain itself. That is unconscionable for tradcons because their conflicted worldview is partly predicated on being left alone, free from interference, much more than the collectivist left. It is a conflict born of the fact that, in practice, the trad right will insist, when the pendulum swings back, on quite a lot of control to enforce its goals. How else to exercise that control than by hating what they idealized in the first place? FutureDad.